My name's Tim Buell, and today I'm going to walk you through exactly how to build acoustic panels for your home studio for under $50. Now, you might ask yourself, why would you want to build acoustic panels for your home studio? Now, the most basic answer is most rooms have parallel surfaces, and those parallel surfaces cause frequency cancellations, frequency buildups. They cause, sound to feel a little more harsh and fatiguing, and in general, just makes capturing a great recording harder. Now, if you're new to home recording, I'm sure you've seen a ton of videos where people are telling you to get started home recording, you need to buy this plugin or this interface or this microphone, and all that stuff's great, but I think the number one priority for people getting started should be to treat your room. Because if you have a well-treated room, that means every recording, no matter how you record it, is gonna sound good. The panels that I'm building today are not going to soundproof your room. Soundproofing and sound treatment are two totally different things. Soundproofing is really hard, really complex, and something we're not gonna get into, but these panels are going to be for treating your room to make listening and recording in your room much more pleasant and high quality. Next, you'll see a lot of people on the internet talk about these little foam things that you can stick on the wall. You can buy them on Amazon for dirt cheap, and they'll talk about how you can treat your room with those. And I would say avoid those at all costs. Those little foam do almost nothing to treat your room, and I'm not going to get into a comparison of those versus the panels we're going to build today, but I've left some links in the description of videos that do compare those cheap little foam squares to the types of panels we're going to build today. And I think if you take a listen to those videos, you'll hear the difference for yourself. And lastly, this video isn't going to tell you how many panels you need to build, because every single room is different and you might have different goals in how you want to treat your room. All I'm going to do is teach you how to build the panels, but I'll offer a couple points of advice for, how many panels you should build and things like that. And what I suggest is first, just build a couple panels and put them around your room. You don't have to permanently put them on the wall, just kind of like set them where you think you might want them to go, and then clap in your space. And when you clap, listen for how those panels are affecting the sound. Now, I've provided a list of the exact materials that I use to build these panels in the description below. You can download that for free. It's a PDF that has, links to the exact products that I used. But let's get into the materials and the tools that you'll need. So firstly, you'll need foam insulation. That's really what does the sound treating. I went with 2-inch Owens Corning 703, but you can also use a material like rock wool. And just know that the thicker the panel, the better. It's really tempting to go with 1-inch panels, but that doesn't give you as much absorption. So thicker the better. And you'll probably want a mask and some gloves, because handling this insulation, it can stir up, little particles, and it's not going to kill you if you inhale it, but you definitely don't want to inhale it, and it's going to cause you to cough and a bunch of stuff. Next thing you'll need is some wood to build the frame that the insulation goes in. And for the frame, I use 1x4s. You can get them at any hardware store, Lowe's, Home Depot, whatever. I get them in 8-foot lengths because I found that all the lengths over 8 feet just you tend to get really, really warped and cracked and just kind of real ragged wood. So I would go with 8-foot lengths because it'll be easier to get things square. You just want to make sure when you're selecting your wood that you're looking down the edge of it and down the face of the board and making sure that nothing you get is too warped. Next, you'll need fabric to cover the frame, and I order my fabric from Guilford, Maine, Duvalex, because they actually make specific acoustic fabric. Again, the information for what I used is in the description in a PDF you can download for free. But you can go to really any fabric store, Joann's, whatever, and buy whatever you want. Just know that whatever fabric you get for the front and the back, you should be able to hold it up and blow into it and feel air pass through it and kind of hit your hand on the other side of it. You also need a tape measure, some wood glue for the frame, some screws for the frame. I use pocket screws, but you definitely don't have to do that. That's just kind of an extra step that makes it a little bit neater. A staple gun to staple the fabric to the frame, a saw to cut your wood, a drill to assemble the frame, as well as attach fasteners to the frame when you're done. And you'll need fasteners to mount the frame to the wall. In this project, I use these kind of slotted plate things. You can also use eye hooks in the ceiling if you're gonna go in the ceiling, and hooks on the frame to hook them in. There's a bunch of ways you can do this. You just wanna make sure that whatever you do, if you're going into drywall, if you're going into the ceiling, you have some kind of wall anchor, or that you're going into a stud, because it's just better to be safe than sorry. You don't want to tear out a bunch of your drywall. Now on to the build. The first step is to figure out how many panels you're going to make and get the wood cut to size. Now the insulation comes in 2-foot by 4-foot panels, and the 1x4s come in lengths of 8 feet. So the easiest way to do this is make a frame of 2-foot by 4-foot. That means you need to cut 2 4-foot sides and then 2 2-foot top and bottom for each panel. Now, right now, the astute woodworker watching this might ask, If you were making the frame 2 foot by 4 foot, your insulation isn't going to fit in because that's the dimension of the insulation. And you're totally correct. What I usually do is I cut the insulation down a few inches off the top because it's just easier to cut the insulation to fit the frame than it is to make the frames bigger, as that throws off how clean and easy the cuts are. And then you have to start getting into like kind of wasting some wood, and it's just not worth it. So just taking a little bit off the insulation to fit in the 2 foot by 4 foot frame is definitely easiest. Now, once your cuts are done, you're going to need to assemble the frames. This is going to require those pocket screws and the wood glue. Once your cuts are done, technically you can just kind of use a screw and screw in, each side at the corner. But I like to go the extra mile and use pocket screws because they provide a nicer finish, and I think they feel a little more sturdy. And I do recommend using wood glue at each seam. It's not totally necessary, but it's definitely going to make the frame more solid. Next, you're going to cut out and staple the back material. Since insulation can get stirred up and kind of get into the air, it's not a bad idea to fully enclose both front and back of the panel, even though people are only going to see the front of the panel. And so basically you can pick up some super cheap material and staple it to the back, just cover that side. And then you need to cut out and staple the front material. And this is definitely where it takes a little bit more care and finesse to end up making sure it looks good. And for your measurement for the front material, you'll need not just enough material to cover the 2 foot by 4 foot panel, but you need enough fabric to be able to wrap around the 1x4 and then make it to the back of the frame and have enough to staple. So if you're building your frame like I am with 1x4s and they're 2 foot by 4 foot in dimension, then you should add about 5 inches on every side of the fabric so that you kind of end up with the right dimension. So if your panels are 24 inches by 48 inches, that means for the front fabric, you'll need 34 inches by 58 inches to be able to fully wrap the front. Now, as you staple the fabric to the frame, you want to make sure that you're stapling this fabric, like pulling it tight so that it looks nice when it's finished, but you don't want to pull so tight that you start to kind of cinch up the fabric in certain places. So it's kind of a delicate balance between you're not pulling tight enough, so then there's going to be some sagging in the fabric, and pulling too tight and creating different wrinkles than you had when you weren't pulling tight enough. Also, folding the corners is definitely a whole art in and of itself, and it does take a little bit of practice, but I like to fold the corners so that they're kind of like flat. And the last thing you have to do is place hangers on the frame and screw it into the wall. So like I said, there's a couple different ways that you can kind of mount these panels. If you're going for kind of what we were doing in this video, you have these slotted plates that go into the frame, and then there's screws in the walls. You just want to make sure that you use wall anchors in your drywall, or you're going into studs, because these panels, they're not too heavy, but they're definitely not light. And, you just want to be safe, and, kind of a slightly bigger hole in the wall is much better than tearing out a big piece of drywall. Now, if you're putting panels on the ceiling, there's a couple things that you can do, but one of them that I really, really like is they make these things called toggle bolts. The toggle bolts are super cool. They kind of go up in your ceiling and are a little bit more secure and sturdy than wall anchors. And, since the panels will be pulling down on the drywall as opposed to pulling vertically on it, I think these are a really great way to go. They're a little more expensive, but they're super, super solid. And what I would do is just put an eye hook in one of those and then put a hook on the panel, and then you're kind of good to go. Now, with the materials that I used, roughly the total cost of each panel is right around or right under $50. The 1x4 wood that you need for each panel ends up being around, like $14 a panel. The insulation for each panel is around $15 per panel. It depends on, if you buy it in bulk or not or whatever, but it ends up being $15 a panel for the insulation. And then the fabric is $20-ish per panel, but that's the fabric I used. There's definitely cheaper fabric out there. So if you're trying to cut costs, the fabric is really what's going to be, the biggest area where you can save some money.